All right, welcome everybody to Now That's Debatable. Got another episode coming at you today. We're live. We have two guests on today. We got TJ and we got King Oglesby. We're going to call him King probably just for safety of time, if that's all right. I'm going to go ahead and get over to our main page with all of our faces on it. And in a second, I'm probably going to disappear because my CPU is going to crash if I don't. But let's get our faces up on the screen. We'll have chat up on the screen. We'll be monitoring that. If you have any questions, comments, today we're going to be talking cultural appropriation. So, without further ado, TJ, if you could get us started with some Relic Media info, and then we'll take off in discussion.
Sure. So first of all, we're going by Tyrell, not TJ.
Oh, sorry.
Look, I'm TJ to y'all because y'all family, but everybody else is Tyrell. So
heard that.
But yeah, no, it's but yeah, Relic Media is the company. Got a bunch of different podcasts. I got a new one about to start. I'm really excited about. Well, more on that later. Relicmedia.com is the website. We are about to go ahead and get the Facebook, the Instagram. Actually, that Instagram is Relic Media too. TikTok is Relic Media. Everything's Relic Media. Facebook will soon, probably as of tomorrow, there'll be a Relic Media page on Facebook as well. And Relic is spelled RELLIC, by the way. I know a couple people were talking about they were searching it and they couldn't find it, but that's because they were putting one L in there. So it's two L's. So yeah, there we go. That's Relic Media.
Oh, so the topic today was cultural appropriation, and so first, I like to have my guests give, I guess, what your understanding of cultural appropriation is, and I can give you mine, or I can give you mine first. It doesn't matter to me.
Let me go first.
Okay.
A good example of cultural appropriation is that damn Avatar movie.
Okay.
But yeah, no, cultural appropriation to me is, say, someone benefiting off of a culture that they didn't experience or they didn't grow up in.
Mm-hmm.
I can give a lot of examples of that,
Okay.
but that's just pretty much my basic definition.
All right. What about you, T?
I agree actually with Chris.
Okay.
It's people trying to take parts of cultures that they're not from and benefiting from it.
Okay.
Yeah, especially I don't know if I want to throw any names out there.
No, throw on.
Yeah, there. But there are some people that I definitely believe are culture vultures, or they have stepped outside of their culture to benefit from other cultures.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll just keep it there instead of saying names. So,
all right. All right. So, I mean, that is roughly what my definition of cultural appropriation would be. I guess like adopting or borrowing some sort of part of a culture that I guess that wasn't initially yours. So how about this? So when we talk about like a culture that belongs to an individual, like what makes a person part of that culture? Is it like their race or where they're born? For instance, I'm likely West African, right? I mean, I haven't done like a DNA test. But look at me, right? And so, right. But like, I don't know anything about the culture, right? And I could probably tell you more about, like Southern white culture more than I could tell you about West African culture. Like, am I culturally appropriating? Or what makes a culture tied to a specific individual?
I think that all of those things. I think where you're from, where you grow up. See now. I think that a lot of people they look at race, and I think that a lot of people think that race and culture are interchangeable.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that that's always the case. For instance, and I am going to throw a name out this time, but I'm not tearing them down. So
okay,
I believe Eminem is part of the hip hop culture.
Yeah,
I agree.
You know, so I don't want it to get confused with a race thing. You know, so, but I do think that some people, I think that when you do start looking at certain things.
How about this? What gives a person a right to use a culture?
Being from that culture, being a part of that culture.
Okay.
What about if they just studied the culture? Like, say somebody that never grew up in the culture, but they studied the culture. Like say, because when you think about culture, you think about a group of people that just pretty much live a certain type of way or a certain way of life. Like a religion could be considered a culture, or a music could be considered a culture, or like the food culture, or like the food culture in certain cities and things of that nature. You know what I mean? So like in DC, like I'm originally from DC, so in DC our culture is chicken with mumble sauce, you know what I mean, things of that nature. So, you know, that's part of the culture. So if you grew up around that, but I feel like if you studied the culture, you know, you could probably be considered within that culture if it's something that you study.
Gotcha. Like, what would you think? Like, what's like some of the problems you think with cultural appropriation? Like, I imagine you don't think it's a good thing, right?
It all depends, because me, I have a different definition. I have a different feeling about cultural appropriation. I feel like, how do I want to put? I don't want to put this in a bad way, but I say let's take hip hop. You know what I mean? You have people you have older rappers that's been in hip hop for years that don't necessarily consider the new age hip hop, the trap music, and all that part of the culture. You understand what I'm saying? But someone who doesn't necessarily listen to rap may put all of that all in one, you know, may put all of it together as far as part of the culture. So it all depends. It all depends on your individual interpretation of what culture is, and depending on what type of culture that you're involved in. If you understand what I'm saying, you know. So.
Sure. So like I saw a video not too long ago. It was some Japanese rapper, right? He had his hair cornrowed, he had a grill in his mouth, and like he was like in front of a Chevy Impala, and it was like Japanese girls, you know, like shaking, like, I mean, it was you would think, I mean, you think they had like copied and pasted like a stereotypical rap video. Like you would say that's like culture, that's hardcore cultural appropriation, right?
I wouldn't say, because he may grew up listening to rap his whole life. Okay. He may live in a hood or in an urban neighborhood, you know, in wherever he lives at. So if it's one thing, like, say, I don't want to call out names either, but we all know a few groups or a few rappers or a few R&B singers or rock and roll bands that have took part in the hip hop culture and
or certain DJs,
or benefited off of it. And we know they didn't necessarily grow up in that culture. You understand what I'm saying? So it all depends. Let's put a reversal on it. Let's say and I hate to go back to more like back in the early times of slavery and things of that nature. But a lot of the things that we adopted from the slave masters or the slave owners would we be considered culture vultures in that sense, because we benefited off a lot of things from them as well. Even though we taught them a lot of things, we also benefited from a lot of things in them as well. Like even in this day of time, let's say the stock market, let's say
sure. But I mean, I would say, like for me, like I guess cultural appropriation, like, and this like demands some sort of, I guess, input from the individual. Like, in order for me to appropriate a culture, I have to be taking it. For me, slavery is a little different, because like I was like, or I guess my ancestors were kidnapped and then forced into the culture. Yeah. Right. So like the culture more appropriated me than I appropriated it.
I agree.
I would say.
Yeah.
So like, how about this? Because you hadn't mentioned music, right? And so if you grew up in the area, like if you grew up in that culture, then you have some sort of, I guess you have some more of a right to it than someone who didn't.
Exactly.
Like, do you apply this to subcultures too? Like, for instance, like let's say like ASAP Rocky. I think he's from New York. Like you listen to his music, is very Texas oriented.
Mm-hmm.
Is that cultural appropriation?
I don't know. I think
there's a difference between cultural appropriation and influence.
exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
All right.
Exactly. That's what I was looking for.
Okay, all right. So, all right, I would agree. So, like, the line is like really gray then,
Yeah.
right? Okay, okay, all right. So that makes sense. Like, so, outside of music, like, do we apply it to like inventions and stuff like that too?
Name an invention.
I don't know. Headphones. I'm wearing headphones. I have no idea who invented headphones.
Dr. Dre. So okay. Actually, since I brought up Dre, are you in that example? Are you saying that Dre could be culturally appropriating headphones because he came out with his own line, even though he didn't create it?
Well, he could, yeah. Because if you say that an invention belongs to a specific culture because it was made by a person who belonged in a culture, then to me, like you run into like a lot of problems.
I see what you're saying. Okay.
Like for instance, right? So like I have a black person is driving a Lexus, right? So that's a Japanese car. So to avoid cultural appropriation, he might have to give up that car to a Japanese person. But then hold up, wait a minute. Japanese didn't invent cars, right? They're culturally appropriating from the Germans.
Right.
But wait a minute. The car said the Germans invented. Did it have a wheel? Uh-oh. Yeah, that came from the Mesopotamians. You see what I'm saying? Like, so to avoid cultural appropriation, like it's to me, it's just unavoidable. Like there's like just about everything that we have. There's so many. It came from different parts of the world. I think the computer that we're using right now, the computers were invented by Englishmen. The algorithms that computers use was invented by Muslims. You know, I mean, it gets to this unworkable model. Whereas if we to avoid cultural appropriation, we're going to be limited to like, spears and rocks and stuff. Like we build up of each other.
But when you think of, you have to go back to the roots of what it actually means. Culture appropriation is more of when you take something from a certain group that's only been known for that, the things that they do, whether it's food, whether it's the way they dress, whether it's the way they talk, anything like that. You didn't grow up in that. You take from that and you benefit off of it, and you don't give them the recognition for that's where you got it from. Like say, let me give you an example. Say like Elvis. We all know that Elvis took someone else's singing style, his songs, his whole makeup. That's something that I consider cultural appropriation right there. Because the guy that he took it from never benefited from it the way Elvis benefited from it. Yeah, he never gave him the recognition for that. So that would be a perfect example of what cultural appropriation is. You understand what I'm saying?
Sure. So as long as you give recognition, you could appropriate, or it wouldn't be appropriation. Yeah,
it would be considered appropriation because you're giving recognition.
Okay. So for instance, like what if like you're like the Japanese, when a Japanese person is inventing a car, he has no idea where cars came from. Like he doesn't care. Is he culturally appropriating? Because he obviously can't give recognition because he doesn't even know.
I wouldn't say that, because even if the Japanese invented a car, I'm pretty sure they didn't sell it to just only Japanese from the beginning. You understand? I'm pretty sure when the cars were invented, every culture benefited from that from the beginning. If you were able to afford a car and buy one, you know what I mean, then everybody benefited for that. So it wasn't a specific group of people, unless it was just the rich that were able to afford the car. That's a whole different thing right there. I'm speaking
Can I ask a question there?
Go ahead.
So you said in that specific instance, like, let's assume Japanese invented the car, even though we know, for the sake of the argument. But you said they didn't sell it to only Japanese people, so other cultures benefited.
Yeah.
So, if being beneficial is part of the requirements to avoid cultural appropriation, then what about people like Elvis, who you would say their music was beneficial to people who listened to it to inspire other forms of music and or dance, etc.? So now you're benefiting other cultures that aren't just the quote-unquote king of rock and roll. That style, you would say, is beneficial to develop music and further music to additional styles, dances, etc. So because it benefited more than just the culture of what Elvis grew up in, would it still be cultural appropriation? Because it didn't work that way with the car, right?
No, that wouldn't necessarily be the same thing, because that style and that brand of music had been around for decades before Elvis even heard it or listened to it or stole it or whatever, you know what I mean?
Sure, but I mean, cars had been around for 40 years before Toyota came around.
But we use the example of the invention of the car. So the beginning of it.
Right, but Elvis didn't claim to invent music.
No, we're not saying he invented, but that style of music, I
don't think he claimed a style either. I mean, he just...
Oh, have you watched that new Elvis movie?
I didn't watch the biography because I'm not that interested in Elvis as a person.
I'm not either,
but I'll say, like, from historical knowledge, my grandmother was a huge Elvis fan, and I'll say, like, he wasn't the self-proclaimed king of rock and roll. That wasn't a title kind of given to him, and mostly closer to his death. But, like, I don't think Elvis would ever... I mean, I could be wrong. He could have said he invented this whole style. But I mean, just because someone does it differently or gets recognition for it doesn't mean they're claiming invention.
How about this? So you had, when I had brought up about a Japanese making a car, not knowing that it was invented by Germans, and you said it wouldn't be cultural appropriation because it was available to various different cultures, right?
Exactly.
So when Elvis made music, his music was available to everybody. Like a black person could easily just go and buy the album, right? Just like a black person could go buy a Japanese car.
Yeah, but when he made the music and he made billions off the music, what black people benefited from that besides listening to it and maybe feeling good about it or anything like that? I'm talking about the inventor, like the inventor of the culture, the inventor of that culture. We know he didn't come from that culture. You know,
so
we know he didn't grow up in that culture of style of music, but he benefited widely from it once he started using that style. If you know anything about Elvis, he didn't even start off doing that type of music. Once he heard that kind of music, he switched his whole thing up. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, he started out as a gospel choir singer.
Exactly. And had he went back and reached back the guy that he heard the music from, or the one that he stole the music from, or the people that he stole the music from, and brought them with him and let them teach him that style, or they did that style together, that would be a whole different thing. Then it wouldn't be appropriation. You understand what I'm saying?
Sure. So about with the Japanese example, so like if you sell a car, like to the cultures at large, largely the Japanese are benefiting, right? Because they're hoarding all that cash, just like Elvis will be benefiting. Like, to me, it seems like a equal relationship. Like, I don't see any difference. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. So, like, how was Elvis culturally appropriating, but the Japanese car makers aren't?
Did the Japanese car makers invent the car?
No, they did not. Germans invented the car.
Okay, so when Germans invented the car, were they the only ones driving the car?
Yeah, whatever.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah,
my understanding of cultural appropriation is different. You know what I mean? So, but I'm just going by the actual definition, the root of what the definition of it is.
So something I wanted to address kind of early on, if I could, and that was, and it's something that was just mentioned again in the kind of previous back and forth, was that the idea of cultural appropriation, given that the name culture is in the title, it's really hard to buckle down or tie down to an individual. Right.
That's true.
So we're saying, like, although, like, you technically may have one person that's an individual inventor of the automobile as we know it, like you kind of have to go back to Triboulet-The's point where it's, you know, what about they didn't invent the wheel? They probably didn't. Definitely didn't invent the engine. They didn't invent all the things that went into the car. They were just the first one to put it together in that particular order, right?
Yeah, rubber.
So, like, all these things kind of go into place because people get their ideas from the people around them, and they put their ideas together in a particular way from the people around them. So a lot of times when people refer to like culture itself, they mean one of three things. They mean like the way of life, the ideologies, or the cultural like proponents. And what I mean by that is, for instance, you might say that like culture is responsible for a particular style of music. That's a proponent and a product of that culture. But in and of itself, you wouldn't be able to single down an individual by any means that was responsible. Like, for instance, you could say there's no one person that came up with the idea of rock and roll.
All right. So what do you consider the Amish?
A religious order or group?
Would they also be considered a culture? Do they have their own culture?
I would say they have a culture. I would say the Amish isn't a culture. I would say the Amish have a culture, and that you could say that if you grew up Amish, that could be your culture. But
culture itself,
I would say Amish is probably referring more to their religion than their
culture itself is defined by a group of people who study or live a certain ideology or a certain group of principles and in a certain manner of way. So they would be considered a culture if you go by the definition, correct?
Well, so, I mean, that's a pretty niche definition of culture in that sense, because you said, like, people have to live a certain way. But, like, for instance, I would say that in any given methodology, or when we're talking about, like, the proponents or the outcome of a culture, for instance, like, you would say something that the Amish do pretty particularly well is they avoid like electronics, right? But they, like, let's say hypothetically, they invented the butter churn, because that's a pretty a typical association with like Amish people is that they're always doing things by hand. Or let's say they invented that. Well, you wouldn't say that butter churn was their culture. You wouldn't say that, like, you would say it's part of, it's an invention that came about because of their way of life, right? It's not their way of life. It's not their ideology. It's their ideologies that basically pushed them in the direction to invent the butter churn.
Well, actually, if it's their tradition to churn butter as opposed to going to buy it at the store, that would be their culture.
Well, it's just a small part of their culture. Right?
Yeah. I'm just using that example. That is specifically what that group of people or that group of religion or whatever you call them, that's what they do. That's their thing.
Right. And if I churned butter because I didn't want to go to the store because I had a dairy farm, would I be culturally appropriating the Amish?
No, I don't consider that as cultural appropriation. No.
Okay, so kind of going back to the original like argument of like Japanese people with cars or Elvis Presley with music, like just because he does something that other people also do, or just because the Japanese did something that other people also did, what makes that cultural appropriation versus me churning my own butter doesn't make me culturally appropriating the Amish?
You know what? I think that we have to look at the specifics. We have to specifically like pinpoint exactly what's going on. So, for instance, let's go back to I want to make a comparison with the car analogy and music. Cars. When cars were created, let's say, okay, so the Germans created it. When they created it, and with the creation of anything, what's the purpose? What is the driving force behind your creation? Am I creating something for my culture, to take pride in my culture? When they created the car, did they create it for the purpose of it being for their culture? Probably not. They probably created it for the purpose of transportation, of course, but then they want to see it as a monetary thing. So it's like, you know what? If the Japanese want to buy it, benefit, then whatever, great. So when it comes to music, when music was created, was it created for the purpose of one particular culture? Probably not. But the different types of music, So when we talk about hip hop, especially when we go to like the reason, like, so we're looking at breakdancing, lyricism, graffiti, all of the elements of hip hop, right? It's a culture thing. It's a culture thing. So for somebody to come into the culture and the things that we hold dear to us, these things mean something to us because hip hop was created during a time when Black people were trying to find a way out.
Exactly.
You know, so I tell you what, we can go even deeper. Let's go to when the slaves were singing songs, right? So if somebody from any other culture was to come in and start taking these old Negro spirituals and start making money off of it, that's cultural appropriation.
Exactly.
So
That
can I like really nitpick here because I'm a jerk most of the time.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
All right, cool. I'm gonna really be a jerk here. So
Let's do
the Negro spirituals, which were sung by slaves, were essentially like oftentimes directions on like escaping to things like the Underground Railroad, etc.
Yeah, right.
However, they got their tunes and their hymns from being forced to attend white church. That was forced Christianity on slaves. So weren't they just culturally appropriating their hymns?
Also, what the religion was about, like it's the Christian hymnals, like that was came from Europe.
Yeah, I mean, like
no, I see that, but you know what though? I see that as, you know what, you gave me. I'm going to take what you gave me, and I'm going to make it better so that I can get out of here. Look,
right,
desperate times call for desperate measures.
So, you know what I'm saying? He took what some guy gave him, whether he asked for it or not, and then made it his own,
hold on,
and then got out of his situation.
Let me take that back. I'm sorry.
Elvis was poor.
Not what was given to them, what was forced upon them. And now, so this is what I have. All right, I'm gonna turn into MacGyver here. I'm gonna take what I have and I'm gonna figure out a way out of here. You know, so that's what that was. But see, the thing is, you know, them. I didn't mean you, but them back then. You know, you shackled me, you caged me, you're trying to force me to be a slave, and now desperate times call for desperate measures. How can I get out of here? How do I fight my way out of the corner? Okay,
so,
cool.
mean, like,
well,
what about like Elvis in his situation where he grew up poor? He was in the army, he left that, he had a brother, his family wasn't very wealthy. He used that music and opportunity to grow into a multi-millionaire star, right? I mean, like to me, it's a change of circumstance that, I mean, although he wasn't being forced to be poor by any means, he was, I mean, born into a poor family. He was like obviously grew up in the environment in which he didn't have a lot of money. He wasn't born to like a uber wealthy family, etc. And he took that opportunity and MacGyvered his way into one of the most well-known singers of all time. To me, you're drawing direct parallels almost.
And look, that's exactly what he did. And cool, look, the game is the game. You won, Elvis. You did it.
Yeah,
but we're still gonna call it what it is.
But I mean, like, why can't we call like Negro spirituals cultural appropriation of like white Christian hymnals then?
Because we sung. Because
I mean,
we sung.
I have no desire to do so, and I don't care. But we're playing the guards.
We sung Negro spirituals, if you call it that. I don't like to call it that, but we sung way before we came to this land. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, obviously, if we're going to go back to the invention of singing, you'd probably say Neanderthals probably first developing language. But I mean, like that's kind of where like Triboulet was going earlier. Is just how far are we willing to go, and how far are we willing to go back? Because if we're borrowing words or language,
when I speak on this, and like I said, I have a total different understanding of cultural appropriation. Me, when I speak on it, by definition, and I try to keep it simple like that, is if you know something that was only known or studied or practiced by a certain group of people, you understand what I'm saying? By a certain group of people, and you come and you steal that idea, or you come and you adapt that idea. You didn't grow up in it. You didn't know, but you solely took that idea just to benefit off of it, or you solely characterized, or you solely industrialized, whatever you want to call, whatever you did to benefit off of it, That is cultural appropriation.
How about
So is it always negative?
No. It's not always negative because a lot of things that
I was just kind of curious where you stand on that. Yeah. Things like medication and etc. Like straight up stolen from other.
Well, I said industrialized. I said
exactly. But
but
mass production of medications and things like that, you would say probably culturally appropriated.
I just said that as used as examples, but
sure.
If you say you and a few of your friends, y'all invented a game, y'all this the game that y'all play. You understand what I'm saying? I see y'all playing the game. I don't even ask y'all to teach me the game. I don't come to play the game with you.
Hey, Kingo, you coming in kind of broken.
It's probably my processor. I'm gonna turn my camera off for now. If it speeds up, I'll catch back up. But
can you hear me now? Can you hear me? You got everything good?
Maybe it is him.
She's still robotic.
Is it me?
I think it's you.
Yeah, it might be.
Yeah, you're a little choppy, Chris.
Well, it looks good on my end. I don't know.
Nah, we just roll with it.
That's fine.
Yeah,
it's still choppy now?
Yeah, it's still pretty choppy. Maybe if you can jump out and try to rejoin.
Let me do that.
Or maybe turn it off the camera and turn it back on.
Yeah, something like that. So there's not any dead air. Okay, he's back. Cool.
How's that?
All right, much better.
Looks like you good now.
Yeah. So go ahead. What were you gonna say?
Like say, you and your friends have a game. Y'all invented the game, and only y'all played the game. For years, only y'all played the game. I'm walking by, I see y'all playing the game. I don't come and ask you how to play the game. I don't come play the game with you. I just sit back and observe y'all playing this game, and I learn the game just from sitting back and observing. I take the game and I go industrialize the game. I go in almost like I invented it and don't give you no recognition for it. You understand what I'm saying? That itself is cultural appropriation. You understand what I'm saying?
Well, they were just playing the game. They didn't invent the game, right? Because
I'm saying they invented the game.
Oh.
I'm saying they invented the game. They played it.
So for in that instance, if they invented the game, then they have like some sort of like intellectual property in it. Just like if I write a song, you know, I have I have a right to the song. But my culture doesn't have a right to my song. That's just me.
That group of people or that group of friends, that game that y'all play every day, that is your culture. That is considered culture. That is.
So you think by just being born in a certain place, that gives you a right to intellectual property?
No.
Or okay. So that's what it sounds like.
Not just being born. No, not just being born.
Okay, well, we're just being in a culture, right? So like I'm in a culture, and like I didn't choose my culture. It just I was thrown into it. Right. And so you're saying because of the culture that I had no part in choosing, I have a right to certain concepts, like such certain forms of music, certain forms of art, etc.
Yes, I believe so.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so that seems strange to me, and it could seem almost as it could be like in a way it's kind of bigoted, right? Because now we're saying because of who people are, they get certain rights to certain pieces of art or intellectual property, even though they had no part in creating it. Like for instance, like I don't have any contributions to hip hop, right? But to say that I have more of a right to it than someone in China, to me is kind of like it's nonsense, you know? Like I don't see how that follows.
I'm gonna read you the definition of appropriation.
Okay.
It says the action of taking something for one's own use, typically without the owner's permission.
Yeah, but so when we talk about ownership, like how like I don't own hip hop. Like I haven't made any contributions to it. I like to listen to it and all that type of stuff, but that's it. So what I'm saying is like, so I don't have. How does me being born in a certain place and having certain, you know, biological properties give me some sort of ownership to something?
I'm not saying to necessarily give you any ownership, but if you grew up in a certain culture, you are part of that culture.
Sure.
We're talking about something that you're part of because you grew up in that, you grew up around it, you were taught that, and so you are part of that culture. So you kind of, I want to say, can claim ownership to that culture.
But you can claim it, but do you? I mean, anybody can claim ownership to any culture. I mean, but like, what gives
culture is not something that someone
right.
individually owns themselves. It has to be a specific group of people that
Sure,
study or experience or anything like that. So it's not. We can't say ownership.
Sure, but we're not talking about the entire culture. We're talking about like specific parts, right?
Yeah.
So, like for instance, let's like rap music, right? Let's talk about like an Asian dude. I don't know if you remember Jin, Rough Riders.
Yes, I do.
So yeah, the dude's from China, yeah, and he starts rapping, right? So like he's not taking the whole culture, just like a one part.
Right. So this is where I was kind of pointing out earlier, just like the way of life, the ideologies, and then like a product of culture, right? In this specific example, you'd say Jin was taking a product of the culture, not the culture itself, right?
Yeah, because when you look at hip hop culture is not just rap. It's like Tyrell said, graffiti. It's the dance. It's the art. It's the way you talk. It's the slang. It's the way you dress. It's that all is combined to is considered a hip hop culture. And of course, it's more people that's getting into the culture and adding on and improving on it and things of that nature. But the you have to look at the core elements of it, which are those 5 things that I named, which would be considered the culture. You understand what I'm saying?
I think that.
So you got people in the hip hop culture that rap, that don't dance, but they are part of the culture because they do that one specific thing, that one specific element that's within the culture. You understand what I'm saying? So that's how it's defined.
I think that what it is when something is intended for a culture and then other people start to benefit from it when it's not intended for you. That's what the problem is. For instance, I'll tell you what, let's take it to gang culture. So you have bloods, right? If somebody who is not a blood starts walking into some area where there are no gangs and nobody knows anything about it, but they start throwing up blood signs and wearing all red and then trying to capitalize off of gang culture or blood culture, that's cultural appropriation.
That's a great example. That's a great example.
So you said if a blood walks into like a Crip community, then that'll be cultural appropriation?
No, that's dangerous. No,
that's suicide.
Right. Yeah.
He's saying that if someone who is not a
you were frozen for a second.
Okay.
He's saying someone that is not a blood, if he was to walk into a blood neighborhood and start throwing up gang signs and start waving a flag, and he's not necessarily part of that culture. You know what I mean? That's cultural appropriation.
Or go anywhere, even go into a neighborhood that's not a blood. Like it could be a neighborhood that has absolutely nothing to do with gangs. And then they start throwing up blood signs and they're wearing all red and they're claiming blood and they're yelling Sue Woo and all of that stuff. So, yeah.
So now we're getting to kind of like subcultures, right? Because like, I mean, gang culture, like especially like modern gang culture, like in a way is a subculture of hip hop in a way. So like, although gangs came around before, hip hop, but at least the way they exist today is kind of a subculture.
I would say hip hop is more part of the gang culture than it is vice versa.
Okay.
Than it is the other.
So, but now if we're going to talk about subcultures, so this where it kind of goes back to what I was asking earlier about A$AP Rocky, who's from New York but have a Houston style, or J. Cole, he's from North Carolina, and when he first came out, like we thought he was like from New York or something, right? So like that's cultural appropriation as well.
No, I think that's influence.
Okay, so couldn't this be influence?
No, because you're not a blood and you're doing blood things like this.
But it's influencing. Like, I mean, I don't see how.
Because the difference is we listen to J. Cole, we listen to A$AP Rocky, and nobody says, "Hey, you're wrong for rapping like that." If somebody goes into a neighborhood and claims that they're a blood and they're not a blood, they're going to bleed.
I've even seen the example. put out there of cultural appropriation is a man dressing up as a female, like for jokes or for a movie or anything like that. You know what I mean? Not necessarily say a transgender or anything like that, but just a guy. Like say when what's his name that did Mrs. Doubtfire, or say Tyler Perry.
Robin Williams.
Yeah, Robin Williams, rest in peace, and Tyler Perry. I've seen people say that's considered cultural appropriation.
Oh, he's appropriating women?
Yes.
Oh. Interesting.
That is interesting.
Yeah.
That is interesting.
I wouldn't say that.
Would you say all
Why not?
women?
Why wouldn't it be? Why wouldn't it be?
Because
Well,
I would say that women
If a
are
man
culture.
dresses up as a woman and he doesn't necessarily identify himself as a woman, see, it's different when you identify, if you're part of the community and you identify as a woman, then that's what you identify as. If I'm a man and identify as a man, but I dress up as a woman to make movies or to do music or to benefit solely off of that, that is cultural appropriation by the definition.
Whose culture is it appropriating?
Women.
So women are a culture of themselves?
Yes. You wouldn't consider women a culture?
I mean, I would.
I
guess not. Because
I think we're
it's a
splitting
very
hairs. We're a culture.
Yeah, it's a pretty generic term to define culture. Because, I mean, women have.
I'm just going by the definition.
Well,
I'm
so
going by
like,
the definition.
how would you define culture to include women?
Hey, sit down.
What do you mean?
Like,
Right here.
can you give me a definition of culture
You don't believe
that would
that women
encompass
have?
all women?
Of course, no. I'm saying culture. Culture is not related down to it. It's not dwindled down to a specific group itself. Women themselves could be considered a culture because women themselves have a numerous amount of attributes and things that they do that men don't do, that men can't do. You understand what I'm saying? So that puts them in a certain group of people or culture because you understand what I'm saying?
No, because I can't come up with a generic enough definition of culture to define all women, and I don't think you can either.
That's why I'm just going by the definition of culture itself.
Well, that's what I'm asking. Can you give a generic culture definition that would encompass all women? Like, can you make a generic definition broad enough of culture to incorporate every woman on the planet?
Like a woman from New York,
like
and a woman in Ethiopia, and a woman
Like
and a woman from like South Africa, and a woman from like West Africa, and a woman from like Luxembourg. And like, I want you to, and women that can't have children, women that are only
their chromosomes. Their chromosomes and having a vagina.
No, that's not a culture.
That's biological.
You said a generic. That's the
but those are biological attributes.
That's the basic generic grouping of women.
I mean,
Tyler Perry
chromosomes and having a vagina.
Tyler Perry wasn't culturally appropriating because he didn't have a vagina. I mean, I didn't see, but I don't. Presumably,
he was acting like he had a vagina, but he was acting like he had a vagina. That's cultural appropriation.
I would say he was acting
like he had a vagina.
I wouldn't say he was acting like he had a vagina because he wasn't pretending to give birth to a child or anything. But yeah, I mean, like the problem with that definition is it's so generic that you can't. I genuinely don't think you could come up with something that would incorporate every woman. And so, when you say culture, you have to go back to that original thing that I was talking about. You have ideologies, you have way of life, and then you have proponents and productions of culture. So you would say that the culture of hip hop produces hip hop, right? But that's not an ideology. That's an outcome of ideologies and the way of life and whatnot. And the other thing I wanted to address is that a couple of times it's been said that like somebody's making something or doing something for the purpose of culture itself. And I mean, there may be a case in modernity in which, you know, someone is doing something specifically for culture, but more times than not, people are doing something because it's passion or desire or utility. For instance, like Germans didn't invent the car because it was going to benefit their culture. Germans invented the car because it was a better source of transportation. But you would say that like
that also benefited the culture.
No one's denying that, but you would never say that they invented it for the sole purpose of benefiting the culture.
We don't know that. We don't know that specifically.
So can
We
you
don't
say
know
that
that
for
specifically.
any person or any individual or any group or any culture that's doing it strictly for this purpose and not for other purposes as well, like to make money or to become famous or because they really enjoy writing or because
The
they
government,
like cars?
the government invented crack to benefit their culture.
The culture of the government?
Yes,
Wouldn't you just say that's the government, not a culture?
the government is a culture.
In what way?
How can I put this? By definition, and I keep going back to the definition.
No, because earlier you said like vagina was part of a culture.
Yeah, I mean, like this is that's what I'm saying. Like, I hate for you to just keep dancing around us, and I'm not trying to be like pushing you on the subject, but like it seems like every time
Give me. How about this? Let's narrow it down like this. Give me y'all's definition of culture.
Okay, a shared
What is
way
your
of
definition
life.
of culture?
That is the easiest definition I can come up with. It's a shared way of life.
Yeah.
So breathing air.
So Triboulet
Because
and
we all breathe air.
I mean,
we all breathe air, correct?
You say that's part of human culture. Sure.
We all breathe air, right?
Yeah. So because we all breathe air, we're all part of the culture of humanity.
So is humanity itself considered a culture? Because we all share. We all share that way of life.
Sure, and then you could break it down into
Exactly,
smaller cultures, like.
That's not what we said. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just going by the definition you just gave me. You said a shared way of life, correct? We all breathe air. As human beings, as animals, as whatever breathes air, we all breathe air. So are we all part of the same culture because we all share that way of life?
When we're talking about sharing the fact that we all breathe this air, yes, absolutely. We're all part of that culture.
So you just gave me a generic definition of culture that didn't win your argument. That didn't win your argument, because you're saying the same thing.
The problem is I can't eliminate all women or include only women by saying that we all breathe air. So the most generic definition of culture being a way of life, if you're saying that you're defining culture as things that breathe air, then technically all animals, all humans, like anything living today is part of the culture. But the problem is you want to narrow it down to a more specific culture when you're talking about things like cultural appropriation, because you would say if culture is just all things that breathe air, no one can appropriate anything because the only thing we're talking about is breathing air.
But I'm going by your definition of
that's what I'm saying. Is. You asked for the most generic definition of culture. I'm saying it's
no,
a way
I didn't
of
ask
life.
for generic. I asked for your definition of culture.
I stand by it. It can be as specific or as narrow as you want to make it, but by you defining it as people who breathe air, you're making it generic. When I say, oh, by the way, Triboulet and I grew up together. We grew up in a similar neighborhood to one another. Okay, well, unless you grew up in a neighborhood similar to ours, you don't share the same way of life that we do. Mm-hmm. But we both still breathe air.
Do you consider a sorority a culture?
I would say it's a subculture.
Subculture.
What makes it a subculture?
It's part of a larger culture.
What culture is the larger culture?
I mean, there's a bunch of them depending on where you want to go, depending on the sorority.
Do they all go by the same laws and bylaws?
No.
So they wouldn't be considered the same culture.
Well, I mean,
I would say call them subcultures.
Yeah. That's
so I guess like because when
I'm saying college is you're saying college is a culture and a sorority is a subculture.
I'm not even saying college itself is a culture.
So what? So what if for it to be a sub, it has to derive from somewhere else? What is a sorority a subculture of what other culture? What bigger culture?
I would say probably originally when you'd have to go back to like where it originally came from, being
like Greek mythology.
Yeah, like not mythology, but the Greeks. But I mean, obviously, it's been manipulated and it's evolved since then. But
also, subcultures doesn't have to be part of the same larger culture either.
Yeah.
Then what makes it a sub?
Well, I mean,
part of. Sub means part of.
Well. Yes, I mean, because when I talk about culture, I'm talking about, I guess, like more of like the social behavior, the institutions, the way of living for a group of people in a certain area, right? And so you get a really small group in a really small area. They have a lot of similarities, and you get broader, and a lot of similarities are still there, but now it's a little more different. And the broader you get, the more different it becomes. So we could talk about DC culture, like specifically, right? And then we could talk about like DC like natives culture versus like I guess the like more of like the professionals that just move into DC.
I'm
right?
glad you just used that example. I'm gonna come back to that, but go ahead.
Yeah. So then we can talk about DMV culture, right? Right. And maybe that could include Baltimore. And now we could just talk about culture on the East Coast, right? And so like that's what I'm saying. So there's a lot of similarities, but they tend to separate the broader you get. And so although the term culture and subculture are kind of ambiguous, but generally when we talk about subculture, we're not talking about any sort of like people group or
typically getting just more restrictive.
Yes.
But
like for instance, like when we talk about the Irish, I would call that a culture, right? When we talk about hip hop, I wouldn't say that is the culture. I would say it's a subculture.
A subculture of what?
Well, probably music, but also other things.
Or African American culture. I mean, that's an African American culture is a subculture of American culture and
let's go back to the example of DC, right? We know that DC culture, go-go music is part of DC culture. It's been part of DC culture from the beginning. Correct?
Yep.
Right? So if you go to say California and someone is the go-go band in California, they didn't grow up in DC culture. They don't know anything about DC, never been to DC, but they're benefiting off of go-go music. That is cultural appropriation by definition of the word. You understand?
Would you say that's a negative cultural appropriation?
No, I'm not saying anything is negative about it. I'm not saying it's negative, but
so, I mean, like
cultural appropriation by the definition is defined in sort of a negative way when you say it.
No, yeah, that's what I was asking. Is there a situation in which, can you give me an example, or you don't have to be super specific if you don't want, but an example in which cultural appropriation is negative? Like you can even say like the Elvis one if that's what you want to go to. That's fine. I'm just curious. Can you give a negative example of cultural appropriation?
Let's say we can stay with rap music, with hip hop.
Okay.
Of course you have some. Of course, you have some rappers. Of course, you have some rappers.
We have like.
Of course, you have. Of course, you have some rappers that are making money from music, but it's a known fact that all the record labels and all the distribution companies are not owned by the group of people that invented rap. Correct?
Yes.
That is cultural appropriation.
Okay.
That is cultural appropriation. They are solely benefited off of something they didn't invent, and they are using that culture to benefit themselves more than it's benefiting the culture. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Okay.
So
that's how I see it. That's how I see it.
So would you say that person's culturally appropriating, or that person's just like a business jerk? Because they're not doing the music creation. They're not contributing to the culture in any way. They're just making money off of other people, which, I mean, that's kind of been the game for a long, long time. But
true.
It doesn't necessarily have to do with the culture, you know what I'm saying?
You're correct.
So how about this? So like when a rapper, he's in the video, he's rapping, and he has a European car behind him. Like he has a Maserati behind him. It's not cultural appropriation.
No, I don't consider that.
Why not?
Because that group or the people that invented the car sold the car for their own benefit. Not for the benefit of that rapper.
That's why he's rapping for his own benefit.
For his own benefit. That's what I'm saying.
I mean, a lot of times they literally saying they're doing it for their own benefit, so I can be rich and so all that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, that's kind of where I was going earlier. It's so rare that you would say that anyone's doing it specifically for the culture. Like, although you'd probably have to ask each individual production. But
go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, like, you have to do each individual production of that individual, plus all the people that went into it. Because I can, like, tell you for sure, if I was in an opportunity to make $1 billion or however much Dr. Dre made off by selling beats to Apple, like, you know, I mean, chances are he's not doing that to benefit the culture of hip hop. Chances are he's doing that to benefit his wallet and his bank account. You know what I'm saying?
Well, hold on. Let me stop you there. Dr. Dre created beats because he wanted everybody.
He bought beats, actually. He didn't invent
them. He came up with the concept of.
No, he didn't.
Because
beats are headphones.
No. With the concept of the beats itself, for the sound of the beats, because he wanted the consumer to hear what us rap. I'm a rapper too, so he wanted you all to hear what we hear when we're in the studio.
So when he invented studio headphones.
Yeah, no, he didn't invent the studio headphones, but
he didn't invent equalizers either.
He came up with the concept of wanting you all to hear what we hear when we're in the studio.
Okay, and in the case of Dr. Dre, he did that to benefit whom or what?
See, but y'all are talking about.
Okay, so like that's benefiting everybody.
Y'all are
right?
individualists.
Yes.
Y'all are talking about one individual person. I'm talking about culture. Devon,
but that's what I'm saying. You can't separate
people that specifically live a certain way of life.
Well, that's what I'm saying. You can't separate this. Like you have an invention that came out by a person, which although I would say Dr. Dre had almost zero input on beats in general. If you look into the history a little bit, he didn't invent studio headphones. He didn't invent equalizers. He didn't do the sound production or the sound evaluation of beats themselves. He wasn't the sound engineer on board. He didn't design the chips. Like there's a whole lot that went into it that Dr. Dre had nothing to do with. By all means, he still gets credit for beats.
The idea?
Did
he steal the idea?
But by stealing the idea, you mean making studio headphones? Or selling studio headphones, or like you got to be more specific there.
But the people who invented it, the people who did all of the work, are allowing him to be the face because they know that that's how they're going to sell it.
So what's the difference in that and Elvis Presley saying all the people that invented it is just going to be the face?
No, because the people that invented beats are benefiting off for using Dr. Dre as the face.
And you would say that
he didn't take it and use it for himself, where they did not benefit off of it.
So okay, how about this? So remember Migos, right? They made us. I think the song that made them famous was Versace, and they just kept saying that word over and over again, right? Versace, right? So you wouldn't think that was culture appropriation, right? It doesn't sound like okay. So what if Versace put out a commercial and they had Migos in it rapping, trying to sell their product?
They're benefiting each other. They're not taking his product and using it just for their own benefit.
So how about this? So let's say Elvis makes music, and then there's a black person that likes listening to Elvis, right? So there's a mutually beneficial relationship. You get the pleasure of Elvis's music, and
let me read y'all the definition real quick, so just so our listeners have an idea of what we're talking about. Cultural appropriation, by definition. Cultural appropriation is inappropriate or unacknowledged adoption of an element or elements of one culture or identity by members of another culture.
You choppy again, Chris.
I'm sorry. Maybe I'm talking too loud. Can you hear me?
Yeah. You sound like a robot.
Every time I read it,
Yeah.
I mean, I think we're all set on the definition of cultural appropriation.
I think this.
No, because I'm gonna say that because y'all keep going back to the thing. I can tell you, cultural appropriation is something that's stolen without the other person that invented its permission.
Okay, so can I ask
that group of people are not benefiting from what was stolen or the culture or the elements that were taken from them.
Okay,
so there was one black person that liked listening to Elvis music, right? So the culture would benefit. Well, I guess some people would benefit. Some black person would benefit if he liked Elvis, or if Elvis took some of the money and then bought a biscuit from a black baker, right? There's
just order.
yeah. What else was saying? So like, I mean,
to go back to the Migos thing, actually, because you brought it up. Like, Migos wasn't famous before Versace, right? Versace was a multi-billion-dollar brand. Would you say that Migos benefited off of Versace's culture? Like, specifically because you're talking about, like, using big name brands and often known as expensive brands like Versace, that when you drop it in like music, you're doing it to like flaunt wealth, if you will. So in the case of Migos, before Migos got famous, dropping the name Versace over and over again, wouldn't you say that Migos benefited from Versace's well-known name and reputation for being an expensive brand? And Versace probably had nothing to do with it. They probably didn't sign off on him using their brand.
The reason why I wouldn't say that is because a lot of us that grew up in the hip-hop culture only know about Versace from hip-hop. You understand what I'm saying?
Okay, so if the only reason that the white people that grew up listening to Elvis knew about that style of music was because of Elvis, what's the difference?
I don't understand what your question is. I don't understand.
Well, you just said like for instance, black people or like certain people only knew about Versace
because listen to Migos.
Because of Migos, right? But
not for Migos, no. Migos was rappers talking about Versace back in the early 90s.
Listen to any artist that would drop Versace or another name brand, if you will. So what's the difference in that?
You know what? Actually, that wouldn't be cultural appropriation because Versace benefited from the rappers dropping Versace. They definitely didn't
at first because Versace was already a well-established brand and Migos was a nobody. So he wasn't doing it to benefit Versace.
Did Versace create Versace only for
benefit
that
culture? Exactly. That's the question. Like that's what I'm saying. I can't
because that's the thing. If it was only to benefit that particular culture,
I mean, it's the
now
benefit,
you have an argument.
I would say yeah. It was only. I would say it was created to benefit the culture of the people that can afford it.
I mean, like I'm just saying it's to benefit people's pockets. Like that's at the end of the day, is money makes the world go round.
Yeah, right. I mean,
and exactly. And I think that when we're talking about businesses, I think that things get a little funny when we're talking about cultural appropriation because if I create something, everybody can buy it. If I'm talking about I'm creating something for the purpose of making money, everybody can buy that. I'm not doing that just for my culture.
So would you say it would be inappropriate for me to listen to hip hop music because I'm not part of the culture?
Absolutely not.
No. Okay, no. But like, wasn't it where you're saying like specifically it was made for the hip hop culture, right? So,
no, I think
how come everyone can't benefit from it?
So because see the thing is, hip hop was made for. So when we talk about the foundation of hip hop, a lot of it was built on lyricism. It was built on the struggle. It was built on trying to find a way out. Now that can apply to anybody. That can apply to any and everybody. So it's easy for anybody to just kind of latch on to the hip hop culture. That's why I led off by saying Eminem.
If I latch onto something that I identify with,
since we're sticking on hip hop, who's a perfect example of cultural appropriation in hip hop?
Let's go Eminem. Do it.
Vanilla Ice. No,
it's fine. You can do it.
No.
Vanilla Ice.
Vanilla Ice. Yeah.
Vanilla Ice.
Okay.
Ice.
I think a better example is maybe a Paul Wall.
Vanilla Ice is probably the best.
Paul Wall legitimately sounds like a black guy.
Paul Wall grew up in the culture. Vanilla Ice did not grow up in the culture.
Okay. All right, yeah, I'll give you that.
Vanilla Ice did not grow up in the culture. But what did he benefit off?
So what do you mean like grow up in the culture? Like grow up around other people who listen to rap, or like because he
grew up in a household of rappers, or
yeah,
he grew up listening to rap. Grew up listening to rap. How about that? Grew up listening to rap, knowing how to rap. Just that's the music that you generally listen to. That's the predominant music that you listen to. So I would say that yes. If you can show me where he predominantly listened to rap music before he started rapping, then I would take that title. Then I would take that title of cultural cultural appropriation away from him. But I try not to talk on anything that I didn't do the history on. So I already know the history on Vanilla Ice.
Yeah, fair enough.
You understand what I'm saying? That's been documented. You know what I mean? So
would you say that because Vanilla Ice culturally appropriated rap, it was negative? That's a negative example of cultural appropriation.
It by definition it's a negative thing.
Well,
by definition.
so earlier you're saying it's not always a negative thing, but now you're saying by definition it's negative. I get that there's a negative connotation, but there's a difference in being negatively connotated and being negative. So
give me a positive example of cultural appropriation that was positive.
Any time that someone took something else and it spread worldwide, and that thing was positive or it impacted people in a positive way. You could go hip hop. Like you would say, hip hop probably started in African American culture, but it has impacted so many more people than African Americans. Like it is a global phenomenon, and people benefit from it, whether it's monetarily, emotionally, or whatever you want to call it. They're benefiting across the world, and I have less to do with the hip hop culture than Triboulet over here, but I would say that I've listened to a lot of it, and I've had songs that like felt like they were speaking directly to me, and like I associated with some of the things that they said they were dealing with in that song. So that benefited me in that moment because it was an emotional connection that I had with this artist. But I have nothing to do with that culture. You know what I'm saying?
What would be a good example of cultural appropriation? Another example I want to say. Since we was talking about cars and stuff, let's say Toyota. If you go back in the 70s and 80s, hip hop was around then, correct? Hip hop was around in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
They were not using hip hop music in their commercials. Now that hip hop has became as popular as it is, and they've seen that they can benefit off of it, now you see hip hop music in every single Toyota commercial as it is. You understand what I'm saying? That is cultural appropriation.
Commercials.
That is cultural appropriation by definition.
So, is it though? Because it just seems like that's a marketing strategy.
Well, two things can be true.
That's true.
I mean, like, so it seems like obviously this person, for instance, like if you pulled up a specific Toyota commercial, and let's just say hypothetically, some famous rapper, like Drake, he's like super popular. Let's say Drake did a song that they used in a Toyota commercial. Don't you think Drake got paid for it?
Yeah, but
didn't Drake benefit off of it?
Yes.
Yeah.
And didn't Drake benefit off of it because Drake makes money and then he uses that to produce more songs that also go into the culture of hip hop?
And I'm pretty sure Toyota.
What I'm saying is, in your example, it's not just Toyota benefiting. Toyota is not the only beneficiary.
That doesn't mean that Toyota isn't culturally appropriating, hip hop. They still are.
Like, it's a negative connotation to say that like cultural appropriation happened, but in that instance, Drake probably made a ton of money. So like, what's the negativity there? Because they're using it to sell more cars, or like.
The negativity isn't, well, see, the thing is now that I think them using Drake is cultural appropriation too, because hey, let's go get Drake.
Yeah, let's go get Drake. Let's
why not?
So we can get this.
People are doing let's go get a superstar. Let's get
somebody from the culture so that we can get this culture to buy our car.
Yeah, but now all you're doing is describing an economy.
Well, economy
exactly. And it's smart.
The economy was built off of cultural appropriation.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Like, it's not always a negative connotation. So I'm saying in the example of like Toyota,
America being built off of cultural appropriation is very negative connotation.
I'm not saying it's not a negative connotation because the term itself has negative connotations. I'm saying in the example of Toyota paying Drake a lot of money to use one of his songs in their commercial benefits both the hip hop community and the Toyota driver community. Because Toyota sells more cars, but Drake also gets a lot of money.
If I have money, right? If I have a lot of money, I see a little kid on the corner rapping, and I see a whole bunch of other kids coming around him rapping. You understand? Mm-hmm. I'm thinking to myself, oh, wow, I can make money off of that. I can do something with that. I don't know what that is, but I see that all this group of people are gravitating towards it. I'm going to put my money behind it and blow it up for the benefit of myself, not for the benefit of the culture. I'm seeing dollar signs. I'm not seeing anything to benefit the culture, and I'm going to implement all my own little rules and things like that to take away from the culture. That's why you got so many older rappers that's broke now because they didn't know business, and that particular company or whoever took advantage of the culture that didn't know. You understand what I'm saying?
Well, all right. For instance, like example, we'll continue with Drake because he's like super famous. But like Drake put out a song called "Big Rings," right?
Uh-huh.
And if you remember any of the lyrics of the song, He got some really big dreams to buy some really big rings because he got really big teams. And all he's saying in that instance is that essentially he's trying to make enough money to provide rings for everybody that works under him.
But you keep individualizing it to Drake.
Well, that's what I'm saying. You can't make a culture an individual thing. So, like, if you're talking about an example of me using a particular hip-hop song for a commercial, right? Then you're individualizing that person or that commercial. And you're saying it can't be, I can't have it both ways. It's either an individual for this commercial or it's the culture in and of itself. And if I'm using this one song by Drake, I'm not appropriating the whole culture of hip-hop. I'm taking this song and I'm using it as a business decision to move forward. Right?
I never said that. You used the example of Drake. I used the example of hip hop itself as the genre of music itself, as the culture of hip hop itself. When I started selling Toyota, I was using a certain type of music. Whatever type of music was hot, whatever type of music I thought was the best for my marketing plan. You understand what I'm saying?
Well, now that I see
that people gravitate towards this type of music, I want that culture to participate into buying Toyotas. So I'm gonna start putting hip hop music into my commercials because I want that culture to start gravitating towards. I need to put this in my commercial so that culture can buy Toyotas. That's culture appropriation.
All right, look, we ain't gonna be too hard on Toyotas. I got a beautiful Avalon, okay? We ain't gonna be too hard.
I got nothing against them. I'm just like,
I don't have nothing against Toyotas. Yeah, I never owned one, but I have nothing against them.
I got nothing against them. They make long-lasting cars.
I'm playing.
But what
we lose somebody? We lost somebody?
Triboulet had to jump off, and if either of you need to jump off, we'll respect your time accordingly. We also like to give you last word of the show, King. So if you are deciding you want to cut it close or you need to cut it off soon, you just let me know. We'll give you last word and we'll jump out.
Oh no, I'm good.
I'm gonna have to go soon too.
I make my own time. I'm good.
Heard that. So essentially, I don't like, as far as taking someone's culture or using someone's culture to benefit themselves. In the example of Toyota using hip hop, for instance. Like, I'm not saying that's not an example of cultural appropriation. I'm just not seeing how it's a negative one. Because all you're doing is you're benefiting the particular artist and potentially spreading hip-hop to people that may not usually get it. And that owner of, for instance, that music or that song, whoever they use for that genre, is probably going to get paid a butt ton of money. So, like, in that instance, like you're saying, it's typically a negative thing and it has negative connotations. I don't disagree with any of that. What I'm saying is, in the instance or occurrence of Toyota using a specific song, no matter the genre, be it hip-hop or anything else, that individual is not Toyota's not the only one benefiting here. So I'm curious, like, where the negative connotation comes in. Where are we using that and where are we getting it at? Because it seems to me like in that situation, you have an artist who's going to benefit from Toyota's use of their song, and then people that potentially have never heard or don't typically listen to it are going to get exposed to it, which may further expand that hip hop artist, fame, if you will. And then you have Toyota making money because they're now selling Toyotas to people they've never sold Toyota to. But you also have this artist making money selling albums to people they would have never bought the album before.
You comparing millions to pennies.
I mean, you think in an example of a giant artist?
I will give the culture a few pennies so that I can make millions. Yes, they individually, that small.
I mean, could you blame the artist for
or record label? That artist or record label may make a few dollars. Yes, they're making money for the work that they're putting in for us, but we're making billions off of something that we're using that particular genre of music to make billions. So we're not. It's not benefiting the culture at all.
Well,
how is that benefiting the culture? That's benefiting Drake as an individual, but it's not. It's not.
But he would say he's a part of the culture, right?
Yeah, but it's not benefiting the culture. He is not the culture itself.
But would his song benefit the culture?
Everything in this world is part of a culture.
Well, but you just said it's not benefiting the culture, but everything it kind of seems, again, we're playing both sides of the fence here. Would Drake's song, in the example of that, be beneficial to the culture? of hip hop.
In what way?
In any way, because you just keep using the term beneficial.
I would say Drake's putting his song in a Toyota commercial. It wouldn't be beneficial to the culture. No,
I'm not talking about it going into a commercial. I'm talking about Drake making the song.
It could be beneficial, and also could be not beneficial.
Okay,
because his influence, he could have a negative. Certain things that he say in the song could have a negative influence on certain people.
Okay, so how would we determine whether it was beneficial to the culture or not?
It's beneficial to whoever invents it or creates it or is using it for monetary or for financial or for any type of gain that they're using it for.
Right, I'm with you there. But how can we determine whether it's beneficial to the culture or not? So how could we determine whether a Drake song is going to be beneficial to the hip hop culture?
I wouldn't say that it would. I would say that a Drake song would be very beneficial to Toyota's commercial.
No. Yes. I'm not asking about a Toyota. I'm not talking about a Toyota commercial right now. I'm talking about in general. Drake drops a new song, right? He puts out a song tomorrow. How do we know whether it's going to be beneficial to the culture of hip hop or not? Whether Toyota does anything with it or not is irrelevant. We're not even like bringing them in the same conversation. Drake's dropping a new song tomorrow. Is it going to be beneficial to the hip hop community? If so, how do we know that?
I don't know. We don't know.
Okay, so in what way could we determine that that's going to be beneficial to the culture?
Say like who did the song? Who did the I would say, would you say like are you familiar with the We Are the World song?
Yep.
Yeah.
Would
you say that song was beneficial to a specific culture? Or was it beneficial to
probably?
Was it beneficial to the human being?
Well, if you grew up in a certain era, it'd probably be more beneficial. But like if you grew up probably 5 or 6 years after I was born, you probably don't even know what the song is.
But I'm saying when that song came out, would you say that song benefited a certain culture or a certain amount of culture?
I mean, it definitely impacted the people that made the song, and it probably impacted their direct community and or family. But like when you say, does it impact an entire community or culture? I don't know, because I don't know how influential it was to that specific group.
Oh, it was very influential to a large number.
A lot of people, right? But not necessarily a specific group, right?
Exactly. I don't know any Drake song that made an impact like We Are the World did.
Okay. But like nonetheless, you would say that Drake is an influential hip hop artist?
Very influential, yes.
Okay, and would you say that Drake has a established point in the community?
Certain communities.
Would you say that Drake has provided benefit to the culture of hip hop?
Hater.
I can't really say that. I can't say he has. To be honest, I can't really say he has.
Specific artist.
I haven't been. I have myself, and I'm individualizing myself. I have never benefited from a Drake song.
Okay, but can you give me a specific?
So I can't say if hip hop has benefited from Drake's music at all. I can't say that.
Hey fellas, hold on real quick.
Yeah.
I got to get out of here. Yo, this has been a great debate. Great topic as always. Y'all do an amazing job, but I got to log off. I got some other business I got to take care of. My phone is going crazy right now.
They just say you got to go use the bathroom, man. Just say it.
No, I just sit here and go on myself. Oh, my bad. I can't. Let me not be this way on their podcast. Okay, that's reserved for our podcast. Okay. All right, fellas. I'm gonna talk to y'all later, man.
All right, man. I'll talk to you later, man.
Okay.
All right.
So yeah,
Did you want to give
me a specific example of an artist, since we've been talking about hip hop a lot, that benefited the hip hop community or the hip hop culture?
We could say Tupac.
Okay, all right, let's go Tupac. I know who Tupac is. I listened to a lot of Tupac growing up.
Okay.
All right. Cool. In what way did he benefit the hip hop culture?
I'm just gonna go. I can't go on the culture stuff, but a lot of things that Tupac talked about, and a lot of his poetry and a lot of his teaching. He had a lot of teaching moments in his song. you can feel a lot of music that he's saying because a lot of people can relate to a lot of things that he was talking about in the song. You understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So, and this is the reason why I don't use Drake and say that a lot of people, that me myself, I can't speak on a lot of people, but as far as the culture, because you have a lot of rappers these days that talk about a lot of things that a lot of people that I know can't relate to. You understand what I'm saying? We can't relate to jumping in and out of a Maybach. We can't relate to having $50,000 to $100,000 or $1 million on our neck. You understand what I'm saying? The things that Tupac talked about, we can relate to. And a lot of things helped us through a lot of times, and it benefited us in that way. You know what I mean? We felt like somebody was speaking to us that lived through or that was going through what we was going through at the time. You understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So it was therapeutic to a lot of people that I know, and talking to a lot of people, you know what I mean? It was therapeutic to a lot of, especially a lot of people that I talked to that were in prison and have been to prison and things of that nature. You understand? Or grew up in the hood.
Sure. So in that case, if, like you would say, that impacted the entire hip hop culture, right?
Maybe not the entire, because
just a
you
very
have
small
a
part.
lot of people that didn't like Tupac. You still had a lot of people that didn't like Tupac or didn't listen to his music as well. So we can't say hip hop is a culture, but I would say the culture of hip hop was definitely benefited by Tupac's music.
Okay. So could you give me an example of me being able to culturally appropriate specifically Tupac? Or like what Tupac did for a community or the hip hop community, or
Be more specific.
like, is there something that I could do right now that would be cultural appropriation of Tupac himself?
No, because Tupac himself is not considered a culture because he's an individual person.
Right. But if I rapped, would you say that that was cultural appropriation? If I took my
If you
inspiration
rapped,
from
if
Tupac?
you rapped, then I would say that you were part of the hip hop culture because you're performing one of those elements that is part of the culture. So I would say you were
But what
part
about
of hip hop culture.
what about Vanilla Ice? He rapped. But you say he wasn't part of the hip hop culture.
Vanilla Ice rapped after he rapped for the specific benefit of benefiting himself.
And what if I
Not-
rapped
not
specifically to
benefit the
benefit
culture.
myself? Like, if I found out that I'm okay at it and I can make some money rapping, what if I did that?
But you yourself said that how much rap music do you listen to? Is that the predominant genre of music that you listen to?
That depends on the day. Because most
That's-
days,
that's-
like, I listen to a different genre. Most days,
I
my
always
playlist on shuffle.
I always learned that when you ask a person a yes or no question and they answer other than yes or no, that they really don't want to answer the
I
question.
mean, real short answer is I listen to a lot of rap, but I listen to a lot of music in general. So the answer is probably no, but I still listen to a lot of rap. Like that's a really hard answer.
So, but that's not the predominant. But that's not the predominant music genre of music that you listen to.
Nah, I typically listen to like classical.
Do you know how to break dance?
Probably nah. I'm gonna just go.
Do
with
you
no.
do graffiti?
In the sense that like I go out and tag buildings. I have before.
Do you do that on a regular basis? Is that your thing?
No.
Then would you consider yourself part of the hip hop culture?
Like probably not, because I don't contribute. To
Okay, so being that you don't consider yourself
be contributing to it.
Yeah. Once you start rapping, yes. But
I'm only doing it for my benefit.
But listen, exactly. So if you're only doing it for your benefit, or to benefit your culture, and y'all are not part of that culture, then yes, that is culture appropriation by definition.
Okay, but like I know a bunch of people that rap that have never tagged anything in their whole life. They don't go out and do graffiti.
You don't have to be involved in every single element of the culture.
Why can't I just be involved in rap and be part
Oh,
of
you can rap all you want to.
So like that's
I'm not saying you can't.
So
but
like,
if you say that if you say that I'm solely rapping, I didn't grow up in the culture. I haven't been doing this my whole entire life. I don't know anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? But I'm going to do this solely for the purpose of making money, and I'm not going to give back to that culture. And I'm not. And I didn't. Maybe this hip hop might be a bad example to be honest, but since we're on hip hop,
Yeah, you see, the problem is like you're not going to come up with a really good example if you can't use hip hop.
You
right?
admit yourself that you're not part of the culture, but if you're not part of the culture and you use the culture for just so your sole benefit and it's not benefiting the culture at all, that is cultural appropriation.
I would agree.
Okay, so how about this? Go ahead. How about this? So let's say Migos, they're using the Versace name solely for the benefit, like, of themselves, like.
No, they use the Versace name because they wear Versace and they like Versace clothes, and Versace benefits, and Versace has benefited from them using the Versace name because they've got a whole lot of younger generation people who didn't know anything about Versace to now start buying Versace and to see Versace as a style and a culture in itself. You understand what I'm saying? So
sure, but you have a lot of people.
Versace benefited from the Migos using their name. So
sure,
that would be considered cultural appropriation.
But you had a lot of people that started out listening to Vanilla Ice and then through there transition to maybe Tupac and Ice Cube and, and Wu-Tang and everything else, right? So
who did that?
Well, I mean, I don't know.
I'm just joking.
I could probably give you specific names. I won't, but I probably could. Because I grew up in a different world. But yeah, no, I mean, I know people that wouldn't listen to people like Tupac or NWA or anything like that, mainly because of skin color. But they would listen to people like Vanilla Ice, and then all of a sudden they were like, oh, wait, there's people that do this better? So, you know what I'm saying? Like, it wouldn't surprise me if I could point out specific people that actually kind of had that journey of, I started out listening to Vanilla Ice, who, has no historic background of rapping and, just did it to try to make some money. But that turned into some, like, rap heads,
See, but this is why I call Vanilla Ice a good example for cultural appropriation, because Vanilla Ice was put in front of the masses for that very reason. I want to get another specific group of people or another specific generation or just people in general, maybe white people. Let's use white people. I want to use Vanilla Ice to get white people to listen to rap.
Okay. That
was the purpose of putting Vanilla Ice in the place where he was. Okay. I'm going to put a white rapper out there so that we have a shining night, and now all the white people that are going to spend money on rap it's going to take away money from all the other rappers out there, but it's going to blow my company up because
let me pause you right there. If I never listened,
I'm not turning this into a race thing.
No. It's not that actually. It's not even going that way. I promise. If I didn't listen to rap, right, and someone introduced me to Vanilla Ice, and then I went and bought Vanilla Ice's album, how did that take money away from Tupac? Because I never listened to rap before. I wouldn't know what Tupac was. So it's not like I'm gonna go out and buy Tupac's album because I'm like, yo, I heard this, it was fire. It was, I've never heard of Tupac. How am I gonna go buy his album? So you've introduced me to something that I've never heard before, and I was like, oh, this is kind of enjoyable. I go out and I buy the album so I can listen to it my own time, which expands my own view of music into other rap communities, maybe Tupac, which may then turn into making somebody, whoever the heirs of Tupac's fortune is, into wealthier people because now I'm buying albums that Tupac made. So if I've never heard of rap and you introduce me to Vanilla Ice and I go out and buy Vanilla Ice's album, I didn't take anything away from Tupac. Neither did you, neither did anyone else in that transaction. All I've done is potentially open you up, or like all I have has been opened up to a potential new style or genre of music that I've never heard before.
What was that the purpose of Vanilla Ice?
His purpose was probably to make money, which is what most people's
was that the purpose of? Was that the purpose of introducing Vanilla Ice into the culture?
I mean, I'm not sure there was like some singular purpose of introducing Vanilla Ice.
Oh, there was. There was.
I mean, you don't think people may have had different reasons? Okay,
it's documented. This is all documented.
So everybody that was a part of Vanilla Ice's career, when they pushed them and put them out there, they had this one singular purpose, and it was to do something that
I mean,
was tantamount to
I can tell
cultural
you that's
appropriation.
very unlikely, given that he straight up ripped off the beat to "Under Pressure" by Queen, which was predecessor to Vanilla Ice by 20 years. So, and that person, the person that wrote that, probably didn't even know or care about hip hop in any way. You have to, I mean, you know that Vanilla Ice, like the most famous song, "Ice Ice Baby," was straight up like they sued the pants off the dude
Yeah,
for
yeah,
stealing
yeah.
the bass line
Yes,
for "Under Pressure" by Queen.
exactly. That adds even more to my argument.
In what way?
Because
Because it takes away from it being a perpetuation of hip hop towards white people, because that definitely wasn't the purpose of creating that bass line or beat. Because Queen was not by any means hip hop.
well, any most of the beats that's in hip hop or just all created from different samples of a different type of genre of music anyway. So
would
you
you say
know,
they're
hip hop.
culturally appropriating their beats?
No,
Why
no.
not? They're using it for their own purpose to make their own money to expand their own
Because
culture.
no, because in order to use a sample, 99% of the time you have to pay for that sample.
And what about that 1% that doesn't? Are they culturally appropriating?
The 1% that doesn't are just the ones that don't catch the sample and go to claim it. But I guarantee you, anyone that has the money to claim that sample and know that that's their sample and they own that sample goes after that money.
I mean, so but sometimes there's no one to pay royalties to. Like for instance, like let's say like a white girl braids her hair in like African braids, right? So there's she's not going to be able to go to anyone and pay to get pay to braid her hair in that way. I mean,
but I seen that used as an example of cultural appropriation as well. I don't see that as cultural appropriation. I don't see a white female or a Chinese female, or I mean Asian, not Chinese, or an Asian female that braids their hair up, being cultural appropriated. I don't see that. I don't see that as a good example because we all cut our hair, we all wear beards, we all use a certain product or anything like that.
I mean, sure, you can have like French braids, which definitely isn't. I'm talking about specifically African braids, like they're having in a way that like West African women wear.
Mm-hmm.
Like my wife, she braids her hair. She looks kind of African anyway, but like she braids it like an African would do it. Like let's say a white girl does that. You wouldn't consider that cultural appropriation?
No.
Really?
No. Okay, I see that as liking a certain style and thinking that my hair is going to look good in that style.
All right, so what about a white girl breakdancing?
I don't see that. I know a lot of white. I have white friends that break dance, so I don't know. I don't consider that. No, dancing is dancing.
Then why's Vanilla Ice? You know when he raps.
And then why is rap like? I don't get the exception. I'm just confused now.
I think y'all are missing my point for the sake of an argument.
I think we're talking in circles.
I'm genuinely confused.
Yeah, I mean, I genuinely want to kind of explore this and like figure out exactly where the line is drawn, because it kind of seems like the more we talk about it, it's like, oh, maybe hip hop's not a perfect example to use for a cultural appropriation, and it's because I keep pushing back on this and I keep giving you examples of like things that happen in hip hop culture that you would say, oh, that's not cultural appropriation. Even some of the things specifically that you said were part of the culture of hip hop, right? And so to me, it seems like if we keep kind of moving the target, that maybe the target isn't all as stable as you think it might be. In which I don't deny cultural appropriation is taking the culture from someone else. I'm really just trying to get to the point of like negative connotation with it and saying, why is it a bad thing that, for instance, Vanilla Ice rapped? Like, is it a bad thing in which, I mean, he admittedly took art form that he didn't create. He took a beat that he didn't make. Like, in every sense, he stole it. But what happened in the long term was it may have introduced more people to rap, which may have sold more rap albums to people that didn't traditionally listen to rap music. So I'm trying to get like where the negative side of it comes from, in a sense that you're talking about an entire culture or an entire community that gets impacted, and it's in this specific instance at least, it's not taking anything away from them for me to get introduced to Vanilla Ice because I didn't listen to that kind of music anyway. So it's not like I'm the rap community or the hip hop community is gonna lose money because I got introduced to Vanilla Ice, because I wasn't listening to rap before Vanilla Ice. That's not my actual case, but like for the sake of argument, versus like I can borrow a sample of music and it's not cultural appropriation, or I can borrow this idea and improve upon it and it's not cultural appropriation. It seems like it's kind of a moving target that's hard to hit. So that's why I was trying to give like get you to give like specific examples of like a negative connotation of cultural appropriation, like not a negative connotation, but a negative occurrence because of cultural appropriation. Because although the connotation and like stealing stuff from other people is wrong, you're not benefiting an individual is benefiting from an entire culture or community. But the same could be said for an individual that comes out of that culture or community. So for instance, like Drake, in the instance of hip hop, like he's using that, and he may have grown up that way, and he may have used that, but it's all to benefit Drake and his bankroll. Drake's worth about $300 million. You would say that like maybe the average person in the hip hop community isn't worth $300 million. Just like if I started rapping, I might not be the very typical like rap community, hip hop community artist, but I might inspire somebody in the future, or I might turn people on to other forms of rap or other rappers. So it's kind of hard to say like it's all negative like it's not just connotation. In fact, that it is negative.
The definition itself is very vague by definition, and can't really be specified to a certain. Let's see, into a certain. I mean, I don't know. I think you keep individualizing it as far as when you say Drake and when you say Vanilla Ice or anything like that. I use Vanilla Ice as an example because I use Vanilla Ice as not Vanilla Ice itself. I use it as the record company or the people that put the money behind Vanilla Ice. Vanilla Ice could have been rapping before he started in the industry or before he was signed or anything like that. He could have very well been. Even if he was, that wouldn't be. I wouldn't consider him cultural appropriation in a sense. But the record label or the company that put the money to back him when they could have put the money on somebody that was better or that was already rapping, but they put it for that specific reason because I want to get this group of people to listen to rap or to listen to this type of rap. That is cultural appropriation.
Right. I'm not.
They didn't know any.
Again, I don't disagree with it.
You understand what I'm saying?
Appropriation, yeah. But I'm curious. Like, other than being negatively connotated, did it negatively impact the hip hop community or that culture, the hip hop culture? And if so, like, what specific ways was it negatively impacting the hip hop culture? Because again, I can point to those examples of like I probably genuinely can point you to people who grew up. Probably started on Vanilla Ice and then turned into kind of hip hop heads, if you will.
Because if I have the money and the manpower, if I own the labels and I have the distribution, I am the distributor, I own the labels, and I have the money to back an artist. We know that back in the beginning, not back in the early stages of hip hop, whoever had the most money to do the most marketing to push their artists the furthest, that's how the artist climbed the charts. You understand what I'm saying?
That's
a lot of times it wasn't. No, it's different now because a lot of people can put out their own music via YouTube, TikTok, anything like that.
Sure,
it's not controlled. It's not controlled by a certain culture of people.
Well, but when you think of like popular hip hop artists today, you automatically think of people that are undoubtedly the wealthiest hip hop artists. When you think of
that's
like
not
people,
true. That's not true.
Sure. Like when you walk out on the street and you listen to the radio, listen to the top 100, you automatically hear people like Drake. You automatically hear people like, I mean, like,
yeah.
Like that's what I'm saying. Like it's just one of those things. Like I hate to beat on Drake. I don't really have an opinion of him. It's just that like when you put out an album and your song, like 15 out of 18 songs hit #1 on the Billboard, and you don't think he's the #1 marketed rapper in the world.
I'm not saying he isn't. I'm saying I'm going by when in the Vanilla Ice era, right? You had MC Hammer out there who was highly marketed. Once Vanilla Ice came out, we said we need somebody. We're gonna this culture is growing. This culture of rap is growing. We need to put somebody out that can take the attention off of what's going on over here, and we're going to put all these dollars behind it to market it to a point where we can garner, or we can benefit off of this culture that we had no idea about, but we see the benefits of it. So we're going to put our money behind it now, but we're going to put our own shining knight out there. I didn't want to say shining white knight, but we're going to put our own shining.
You want to
we're going to put our own shining knight out here to benefit and to take away from what is going on over here. You understand what I'm saying? We're going to try to wash out the competition. You know what I mean? With this, with this person that we're going to push, we're going to put the money behind. So that's what was done.
That it like can and probably is done in that sense, pretty much across the board, where you have like large corporations and large organizations basically saying that I'm going to throw more money into this to essentially like eradicate the competition. But that's done with cars, it's done with music, it's done with individual artists.
Exactly.
And I don't think that in any sense that I would deny that a lot of times that is cultural appropriation. I'm just saying the negativity isn't the cultural appropriation itself, it's the methodology or the ideology that's done behind these big moves in culture. So like what I'm saying is the negativity is actually not Vanilla Ice going to be a rapper, it's the people that try to push him to essentially get other black rappers out of the limelight.
Exactly.
So like, in the sense of him rapping, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just that if you're promoting his rap specifically to try to get other like black artists out of the limelight, then you're kind of a racist asshole.
True. That's true.
But in and of itself, him rapping isn't taking anything away from the hip hop culture.
No, I didn't say him rapping. Yeah, I never put it on Vanilla Ice as an individual.
Right, but that's what I'm saying. Like, it's really hard to disparage a culture as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
It's really easy to kind of like pinpoint specific examples, which is kind of what we've done throughout like this whole topic back and forth.
Yeah.
Is that like when we talk about like a specific example of someone, then we have to like, oh, well, what about like the person that inspired them and the person that wrote the song and the person that did this and the person that did that. And so like you have to realize that like it takes an army to kind of like put some of this stuff together. But if the intention, which I would say like is really hard to define for most people, and most people don't put out stuff specifically for their culture. Most people do it with aspirations in mind, or because, for instance, you could talk about like some of the older like style rap where they were talking about things they did on the daily, where it wasn't they were writing because they wanted to like show the culture anything. It was because they were doing it because they were telling their own story, right? And people might relate to that story, and that's part of the culture, but they weren't doing it to necessarily benefit the culture. They were doing it trying to make $1.
You're right. I'm not disputing that. I'm not disputing at all. But by definition, and I keep going back to definition because, you know, like I said, I have my own understanding and definition of it. I really don't. I'm just going by definition.
Sure.
If we are a group of people, let's say, I don't want to keep it on race. Let's keep it on hip hop.
Sure.
I have a rap group. We are a rap group. We've been rapping for years and years and years. You understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Until you have a record label, you and your group have a record label. Your team, you have a team. Your team didn't think about rap at no point in time, and y'all were doing music for years and years and years at a time, right? You knew about rap, but you wasn't thinking about rap until you seen that it was beneficial for you. And you did whatever you could do. You put your money behind it to use rap to benefit you because you seen that you can make money off of it, even though you have no intention on using it to benefit the culture at all. By definition, that's what that would be. By definition, that would be cultural appropriation. That would be if you've been selling hamburgers and you invented the hamburger, or you've been your group or your specific group of people have been eating hamburgers in a certain style, grilling them, however y'all prepare them. You know what I mean? I see that y'all prepare them in this way. I see that I can make money off of it. I take that idea from you. I industrialize it. I don't give you any benefits of it. I don't give you recognition for it. I don't give you any money for using that idea or anything like that. that would be considered cultural appropriation. You know what I mean? So that's how I see it. That's how I see it by definition. You know what I mean? It's not an individual thing.
I agree. I was just trying to get kind of more into the like beyond the negative connotation.
That would see, but that's the negative context of it, is that I'm stealing something, I'm taking something from a group and not giving them recognition for it.
Yeah, but like,
then they're not benefit off of what I'm doing.
Well, so like for instance, in the example of a group, it's really hard to give like specific kudos. So for instance, like, would you say you individually are part of the hip hop culture?
I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say I'm part of the hip hop. I listen to hip hop.
Okay.
But I listen to R&B more than I listen to rap.
Okay. Would you
now R&B is considered kind of hip hop? Yeah, because he does hip hop music.
Okay, so let's say Drake, for example. Let's say I never heard a song by Drake before. All I've done in my whole life, I've listened to Tupac growing up. Okay. But Drake is, you would say, a part of the hip hop culture as well as Tupac. We already established he was, right? Yep. So if I grew up listening to nothing but Tupac, I've never heard a Drake song in my whole life, and then I'm like, yo, Pac is such a good rapper, and he tells a story, and I feel a certain way when I listen to his music, and I really like the way the lyrics speak, and it's part of the way he grew up, and I really like to do that. And I try to emulate Tupac by rapping, okay? And I say, like, I want to become part of this ideal of, like, I want to be a rapper, I want to inspire people, I want to tell my story just like Tupac did. Does Drake deserve any credit for me becoming a rapper?
If you're influenced by Drake.
But I've never listened to Drake.
Oh, if you never listened to Drake? No. Yeah. No. Okay. I don't give you no.
So like, how do I go about giving an entire culture kudos for me becoming a rapper? Because Drake had nothing to do with it. But you would say he's a part of the hip-hop culture, whereas Pac was my only inspiration in that example. So that's why it's really hard to say, like, oh, the entire culture deserves some sort of credit or responsibility, because culture means that, like, people might have the same ideology or they may have the same way of life.
If a part of that culture influenced you to want to become a part of that culture, then that itself is giving it recognition. You understand what I'm saying? If you're saying that Tupac, even though he's not the whole culture, but Tupac is part of the hip hop culture itself. If Tupac influenced you to want to be part of that culture, then yes, the culture influenced you to self, and you will be given recognition to the culture for the influence.
But
even though it was just Drake, Tupac individually.
Why should he get any credence for my becoming a rapper? Because
it's not him individually getting Drake individually is not getting any credence. It's the culture of hip hop itself is getting
would Drake then benefit from it?
If y'all do a song together, so like that.
Yeah, so I don't know. You see where I'm going with that?
I don't know.
It's
I understand what you're saying. I understand what you're trying to say, but benefit doesn't necessarily have to be financial or anything like that. I agree,
but like, if Tupac is the sole responsibility of my becoming a rapper because that's all I've ever listened to, then to say an entire community deserves kudos or credence for my becoming a rapper is a bit of a stretch of the imagination. Now, I'm not saying that Tupac isn't a huge part of the hip-hop community or that Drake isn't a part of one. I'm just saying that when you get into these specific nuances and you say, like, oh, this is part of the hip-hop community, but this isn't, you're really, really careful about splitting hairs that I don't think you necessarily should be. Instead, I think you should take the and I hate to use the term because I think it, and I'm going to be really frank, I think it's a white person invented term to steal things from other cultures, is cultural appreciation, where I appreciate something or some part or some production of the culture so much that it inspires me to do it. Now, my end game might be different, and I might be a jerk just trying to make money. There's no way to know that without, like, knowing all about what I'm doing it for and how it came about and all this other stuff. But on the face of things, it might be beneficial to the culture as a whole because it could inspire others to listen to additional music put out by that culture, or it might inspire other people to become part of the culture in different ways or methods. Like I put out a song that people like create this really cool dance to, and like all of a sudden is a dance. It's not even a song anymore. So like what I created was inspired by Tupac, which turned into a dance, which turned into this YouTube short that now a community is benefiting from Tupac, that I had, you know, I wrote a new song based off of it, but the song didn't matter. It was a cool dance song, and the dance became so influential that, you know, like, see what I'm saying? Like it's just a play on a play on a play. So that's just kind of where I was going with it.
See, I wouldn't consider somebody that's influenced by something that wants to do something because they're influenced by it as appropriating it. You know, you understand what I'm saying? You're influenced by it. It's something that you it's something that you love to do.
But even in the case of like Vanilla Ice, he's getting influenced by moneymakers. You know what I'm saying? Like, he's doing it because there's an influence. He's doing it because people recognize the influence of hip-hop in the industry. And what they're doing is capitalizing on that, which I'm not saying is good or bad in and of itself. The way you capitalize on it might be good or bad. But it is marketing 101, and people are going to utilize and capitalize upon that no matter who gets offended or whatever in the process. And so it seems like maybe the issue isn't cultural appropriation itself, but the manner in which people use culture to benefit only themselves instead.
That's pretty much what it is. That's pretty much what it is. Like I said, it's so vague in definition that it could be tagged on a lot of different things. It could be applied to a lot of different things and a lot of different cultures, to be honest, because when you look at culture itself, there's so many different ways of life out there now, and each one takes from the other, you know what I mean, and benefits off of it and improves on it. So, you know, and that's why I have a different understanding of what of it. It's, you know, what it is. Yeah. My examples are the understanding that I have of it as far as by definition. You know what I mean? Because that's the only thing I really have to go on.
Sure. So I mean, we've been at it almost 2 hours now. I want to be respectful of your time, and I have some things that are coming up soon. I would like to give you the last word of the show. If you'd like to promote anything, you're now the person on screen. So if there's anything you want to promote, anything you want to say, anything you want to wrap up, the floor is yours. You can take as long as you'd like. When you're done, the call's going to be over.
Yep, I appreciate y'all having me on, man, and you know, and talking with y'all. I hope y'all will have me on again. Also, I would like to have y'all on our podcast, which is the King Lair podcast, new to Relic Media. And I appreciate y'all having us, you know, in Relic Media family. You know what I mean? Just check us out. You know, we got new podcasts coming up soon. As you see, I'm in the studio now, you know, working on some good content for y'all. So just check us out whenever we hit the scene. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for coming on, King. Appreciate your
input.
It, man. Hope we can have you back on. We'd love to come on yours. Definitely. If that's something you guys want to do.
Definitely. I love it, man. I love it. You too, man. You too. Enjoy your night, man.
Yep. See you, buddy.
All right.